was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Well, it's almost the same. It's a bright cold day, although I wasn't outside yet, and the clock is striking 13. Moin moin, dear people, old, new, my friends, the friends of my friends, and relatives, and anyone in the whole world who found this video or who found my channel and thought that the topics I'm talking about might be interesting for them. My name is Anna, of Northern Germany, a survivor, a fighter, a writer, originally from Russia, and this is about Russia. This video is about Russia. I'm going to speak about Russia. And also I'm going to speak about Russia in the context of this book, 1984 by George Orwell. George Orwell is his pseudonym, his original name. I can write somewhere here. And I must say that I have been postponing reading George Orwell 1984 for a long period of time. And the reason for that is I knew what I was going to find there. And eventually, when I found this book, or when this book found me, or when the time came that we found each other, yeah, I turned out to be right. And I want to share with you my thoughts that this book provoked in me. And I want all us to think I will be talking about my homeland. I will be talking about my homeland and comparing it to the book and answering the question, well, is Russia living in 1984? And you can think about your own country if you're worried that your country is taking some direction that is not really pleasant for you or for other citizens. And yeah, I tried to find the least beautiful place in my friend's house. And it's difficult because they're middle-class Germans, and I tried to find something that would look like blue overalls, like the party clothing that the party workers were wearing in the book. And yeah, it looks a bit weird, maybe. No makeup, because the topic is very serious. And I suggest starting. I believe I don't really need to present the novel because the majority of people, but not me, have already read this book long and long ago. In some places it is studied at schools, of course not in Russia. In general, we don't really tend to study foreign literature, and usually we study something like Jack London. He's not my favorite author, and I don't really remember the things that we used to read at school. We study Russian literature because Russia wants to raise patriots, especially now when the war is full scale. But I believe that to read George Orwell at school is not such a bad idea because this book is talking about the harmful nature of the absolute power. And recently there was another book that I was reading that was also connected, or it touches upon this topic. The power must not be absolute because people might abuse it. And it's horrible when there is one person who accumulates all the power in their hands and they're free to do whatever they want. They can murder people, they can torture people, they can do all these wonderful words that YouTube probably doesn't like. I don't know. I'm telling you. It's been a year since I'm filming videos. And recently, what I saw from in the video of one of my favorite political scientists. I have a favorite political scientist, like all Russians do. We all like Ekaterina Shulman. You can look at her portrait, at her photo, and she, of course, looks like a kind teacher, and we all enjoy her lectures. I also saw her in Hamburg. She came to visit with her partner in crime, with her co-host, and there was a nice lecture with questions, and she is a political scientist, and she says that autocracy is the natural state of things. It's not normal for people to have democracy. When people gain power, they want to seize power. This is what also you can read in this book. Freedom and democracy they are something that you constantly have to fight for. And unfortunately, my copy of German Constitution stayed downstairs, but what it is written in the German Constitution, that if there is a threat of the destruction of the natural order of things, of democracy, German people have the right to go and protect their constitution, to protest and maybe use some weapons even. I'm not sure about that, but they have the right to go and to protect their constitution and their democracy, whatever it means. That's why people tend to lose the ground a bit. That's why in Germany the AfD party is extremely popular. That's why Donald Trump has won the elections, because people are used to comfort, maybe, and right now economy is not doing great, and people start thinking that maybe if they bring the things back, like patriarchy and less freedom and stuff, they will be able to regain their comfort, regain their prosperity, but it's not what happens actually. But when we talk about Russia, and this one is based on the USSR, and it's not a secret. Yeah, it's based on Stalin's regime. And if you know history, you can easily recognize Stalinism in this book. And of course fascism, but Stalinism and fascism, they're not that far from each other. Although, yeah, there might be people who might call me a Nazi because of that, and I already had an experience of that. But no, you are not right, guys. I'm sorry. Although Russia had quite a big chance to become a democracy after the USSR collapsed, and there were people who were ready to do a lifelong battle for the democracy, it didn't happen. Why it didn't happen? Because, well, in 1996, the elections were falsified and Boris Yeltsin became a president, well, not exactly fairly. And at that moment, the politicians, they were thinking that they are protecting the people who don't know what they should choose. They're protecting the people from communism to return to power. They were thinking that they were protecting democracy, but actually they broke the code. According to the same political scientist, Ekaterina Shulman, maybe you have some other sources and you can write in the comments that I'm not right. I'm quite open to a discussion, but to a proper discussion without insults or without calling each other Nazis, etc. Yeah. And for the ones who don't respect me or my subscribers or my friends or the friends of my friends or my relatives, the diarrhea curse protects this channel. So yeah, and if you're not afraid of the diarrhea curse, there will be constipation curse. Just saying. So what Ekaterina Shulman says, for democracy to persist, there should be at least 2 cycles of democratically staged elections. So people must feel the democracy at least during the 2 cycles, so let's say 10 years or so, or maybe a bit less, when people choose their leaders democratically. And in Russia, the cycle was broken, and also the USSR have been brainwashing people for ages, and it resulted in people going for something that reminded them of their peaceful past, which was poor, which was partly unhappy, but which was the past in which they didn't really have to take responsibility for themselves, so there was like patria, there was like this fatherhood above them. And this is the first thing that I'm going to talk about. Will Big Brother ever die? Of course not. How could he die? Next question. Does the Brotherhood exist? That, Winston, you will never know. The Brotherhood is the oppositional force, and the Big Brother is the leader, the leaderly, the fatherly figure. A leader in a dictatorship or in autocracy is a figure. It's almost a god, someone that you're looking at, the savior, the person who can bring the relief to all your sorrows. This is not just a person. This leader must never die. This person just cannot die because it's not a leader, it's a god. And this is the problem in many countries. People think that the leader is irreplaceable. Although Putin, for example, he came to power as a democratic leader. He came to power as an elected president, democratically. But in the course of years, he created the image of that god, of that Tsar, who saves people from evil. And who can be evil? Evil, it can also be the people on places, the governors on places. In Russia, we have a phrase, "Царь хороший, боярева плохие." That means that the Tsar is great. Those are the boyars who are the evil. I suggest listening to this piece from 1984. Given this background, one could infer, if one did not know it already, the general structure of oceanic society. The apex of the pyramid comes Big Brother. Big Brother is infallible and all-powerful. Every success, every achievement, every victory, every scientific discovery, all knowledge, all wisdom, all happiness, all virtue are held to issue directly from his leadership and inspiration. Nobody has ever seen Big Brother. He is a face on the hoardings, a voice on the telescreen. So, the God. He is the God. He is someone who you have never seen. And of course, we saw Putin on the TV screens. And right now, he is probably hiding in his bunker since COVID hit. But you can see this, the connection is that the person, the leader, is not an ordinary human being. It's not someone who is capable of making mistakes. No, this is the father. This is the person who can protect you from the bad, from the tragedy of the cruel world behind the borders of your countries. And that was the idea of Putin. And I remember when I was growing up, there was this Putin Live with various journalists, and it continues till today when various journalists, they ask questions, and of course they are all propaganda journalists and sometimes close to propaganda journalists, and they ask questions from people who are like really pro-Putin and who are suffering in their regions because life in regions is very, very poor and very, very, very miserable. And they call to Putin, and live he solves their problems. And sometimes those are problems such as a girl wants to have a dog and her parents don't allow her to have a dog, and he presents her dog. Or those are more serious issues. For example, I don't know, some injustice happens, or people invested money into a house that was being built, and then the company collapsed and they couldn't get their money back, and the only way for them to seek justice was to reach out for the president, who is almighty, can solve all their problems. And this is the biggest problem, because it's an elected president. I just want to remind you, this is a servant, a human servant, a person who came to do as much as possible for his people during the first term. Normally, 4 years, it's more than enough to show that you have been doing some useful things. 6 years, too many, because 6 years will turn in 12 years, and then it will turn in 18 years, and then it will turn, you know, into what it is going to turn. Any dictatorship or any dictator-ruled system desires you to believe that you are alone, that you are alone somewhere, that you are insane. And the examples that I can provide you with from 1984 will be very similar to the things that you experience as a Russian. Winston, the main character, he is hesitant to protest or do anything or to show because he's frightened, of course. But also he has such thoughts. He might be alone in holding that belief. And if alone, then a lunatic. And when he was being by another character, O'Brien, because I still don't know if YouTube says that it's horrible that I use such words, but this is just life. I don't know, whatever. And during this processing, also O'Brien is trying to convince Winston that he chose to be a lunatic. He chose to be alone. He is lonely. He is lonesome. There is no one who would support him. And at the same time, while he is in this cell before being punished by the system, he sees people, various people who were caught for this thought crime, because there is no difference between a thought crime and actual crime in this universe. And he even meets the person who you would never think of. You would never think of this person as of a traitor. And he, during his sleep, started to pronounce things such as, "We will go down with the big brother," or something like this. You're not alone, and it shows in different people in different ways. But the system wants you to feel alone, because if you're alone, if you think that you're crazy, you will never protest, you will never rise to stand up, you will never stand up for your beliefs, because if you're crazy, why would you? And you must feel powerless. You must feel like all you do, you will do in vain. And there is another example. The party could not be overthrown from within. Its enemies, if it had any enemies, had no way of coming together or even of identifying one another. That was why a year ago people did the noon against Putin. after Alexei Navalny was killed, because it was important for people to show up at the exit poll at 12 and to see each other, because that was how they would notice that they are not alone. And that's why people were lining up to leave a signature for a candidate. He was Boris Nadezhdin, and he was an anti-war candidate, and people were lining up also to see that they're not alone, because it's very scary when you are powerless. And you are, of course, never powerless, but, of course, at the same time, the system is bigger than you. This is an unequal battle that is very hard to win, and even the bravest might fall. War, however, is no longer the desperate, annihilating struggle that it was in the early decades of the 20th century. On the contrary, war hysteria is continuous and universal in all countries, and such acts as of children, the reduction of whole populations to slavery, the reprisals against prisoners, which extend even to boiling and burying alive, are looked upon as normal, and when they are committed by one's own side and not by the enemy, meritorious. None of the three superstates could be definitely conquered, even by the other two in combination. Those are the quotes from the book, obviously, but they could be as well the description of the war between Russia and Ukraine, because even ordinary people, even somewhere in Germany, when I worked once at some place at the kitchen, because I do a little job as the kitchen help, a person told me that this war is not possible to win. Nobody is going to win this war. Everybody is going to suffer. Everybody is going to lose people. Everybody is going to lose money. But there is no way that a modern war can be won. And for example, for Putin, it doesn't even matter anymore. Or I don't know if it ever mattered. Because for him, the war is the way to state power. Why? There is another quote. Because the body swells up until it fills the universe. And even when you are not paralyzed by fright or screaming with pain, life is a moment-to-moment struggle against hunger or cold, or sleeplessness, against a sour stomach or an aching tooth. Because when people are unhappy, when they are poor, when they are distracted, they don't think about an uprising to get rid of the moldy leader who doesn't really correspond to their demands. Well, I think he doesn't correspond to people's demands since, I don't know, 2008. Of course, any autocracy, any dictatorship has politicals or political prisoners. And of course, Russia also has political prisoners. They were exchanged last year in August. And that was a very, very happy event in the row of very, very tragic events. Many people from the list, many people from the among the exchanged, their lives were saved, literally, because some of them were poisoned several times already. Some of them were like Alexei Navalny, but Alexei Navalny had died by that moment already. And it's very scary to realize that this person is going to be next. But then, in a year or so, you see this person alive and well giving a lecture. That I'm talking about Ilya Yashin. I volunteered at his meeting with his electorate in Hamburg. It was very nice to see him alive and well. And the politicals, they are treated like trash in jail, especially they're treated worse than people who committed like the most horrible crimes. The quotes from 1984, if you please. All the dirty jobs were done by the politicals. Thus do we have. No one else had spoken to him, to Winston, the main character. To a surprising extent, the ordinary criminals ignored the party prisoners. And yeah, it's also kind of a torture with silence, because people are social animals. They need to interact, and it is very hard for a human being to tolerate the fact that they are excluded from their community and that they're being ignored. There was also another episode when Winston, well, it's not the first person book, but it was described that Winston is used to sleeping with light blasting into his eyes, and it also kind of a torture when you're not allowed to sleep, or when you're allowed to sleep but people are interfering with your sleep when the light is on or the music is loud. Also what Alexei Navalny was saying when he was still alive, that the music was so loud, and it was also a propagandist radio wave, and it was unbearable, and the light, and also co-prisoners. For example, Alexei Navalny, he was having a co-prisoner who was a homeless person who was ill, who was basically a biological weapon next to him. How incredible is that? Another thing that I already mentioned a year ago in my video dedicated to the noon against Vladimir Putin. And I mentioned that if you want to look, if you want to be careful, and you don't want to miss these first signs of a dictatorship, you should look at children at schools, what is going on at schools. And for example, what is going on in this book? Children, there is a quote, and I think I quite remember it well, that it was quite normal for parents to be afraid of their children, because children were turned into Pavlik Morozovs. And if you don't know who Pavlik Morozov is, you can Google. I think it's like a fictional character. I'm not sure he existed. I think he's like Stahanov probably, or maybe he did. But basically he was famous for denouncing his own father or his own family. And he was an example for Soviet kids for many, many years. And he was like this figure, legendary figure. And this is what kids do in this book. And in Russia, unfortunately, we have several movements, for example, like Nashi, or means like ours. And if we have Nashi, that means that there are also the enemies, you know. And there are other movements. There are this pioneer movement that was preserved in some schools. Like my cousin, she was studying and she was a pioneer. And she is of the same age as I am, so she's turning 28 in April, so she's a young woman. And what is going on at schools right now, I am really terrified to imagine, because they have these tables, empty tables, or the tables for these veterans of the war in Ukraine, like imaginary, like a monument in a classroom. They dedicate schools to the war criminals, basically. And it's very, 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 very difficult to grow an independent mind in such a school. And it's very, very terrifying. It's terrifying to think about what is going to happen to these kids like in 10 years or so. You know what is another like very, very evident sign of a regime? and of the things going in the wrong way is that people are scared to speak up. And some people, they choose not to speak up, and they choose to take the side of the leadership. They want to protect themselves, and they start thinking that if they follow the rules that the dictator established, they will be safe and their families will be safe. And sometimes they will be probably able to allow themselves a bit more than ordinary people because they are close to the body, as we call it in Russia. But the reality is that nobody is safe. And I had already mentioned this character, and his name is Parson or something like this. And he was a true patriot, like an easy kind of patriot who loves their country but doesn't think too much. And this person, as I had already said, that this is not the person that you're expecting to see in jail for a thought crime. But it happened to him, and he was betrayed by his own mind in his sleep. And people who follow all the rules and who feel themselves safe, close to the body, they can actually never ever be safe, because today the leader is in favor of you, but tomorrow you do something and goodbye. Rutherford had once been a famous caricaturist whose brutal cartoons had helped to inflame popular opinion before and during the revolution. Even now, at long intervals, his cartoons were appearing in the Times. They were simply an imitation of his earlier manner, and curiously lifeless and unconvincing. Always they were a rehashing of an ancient themes, some tenements, starving children, street battle, capitalists in top hats. Even on the barricades, the capitalists still seem to cling to their top hats, an endless, hopeless effort to get back into the past. He was a monstrous man with a mane of greasy grey hair, his face parched and seamed with thick negroid lips. At one time he must have been immensely strong. Now his great body was sagging, sloping, bulging, falling away in every direction, seemed to be breaking up before one's eye like a mountain crumbling. There was a strong man, and we have like many examples in Russia when people just lost their power. And in this book, for example, sometimes they were evaporated. That means that they didn't exist anymore at all, even in the memory of people. Or sometimes they got some unimportant posts somewhere in the government or not in the government. In Russia, it was also the same. For example, Dmitry Medvedev, after he ceased being a prime minister, and a terrible prime minister he was, and for him some work was invented, some kind of a job, some governmental job, very unimportant, but at the same time something. But at the same time, everybody understood that Putin is not in favor of him anymore. It was so clear. And of course, here it's much more harsh because people are evaporated. But, well, Russia, it might also happen sometimes. And also, I wanted to give an example of a naked party. And if you're not a Russian or not a Russian speaker, you have no idea what it is. But basically, those were the stars who were kind of close to the body. And one of the stars organized a party which was very, very naked, very homosexual-like, if we call it like this, a very, what is called, like, well, it was a very liberated party, if we say like in a mild way. And they were all half naked, and somebody denounced them because the country is in war and they are praising European ideals, European traditions, homosexuality, right amidst the war. And people were forced, the stars were forced to apologize, and we even got a term which is called an apologizing turtleneck, because people were wearing these turtlenecks and they apologized. Some people, mostly men, regained their positions. They are not as successful anymore, I believe. For women, it was much worse, because a woman. If we started talking about women, a sign of dictatorship, because dictatorship is rooted in patriarchy, the mistreating of women. And here, for example, in 1984, giving birth is the duty to the party, because the party needs people. And the same thing in Russia. The government is crazy about raising this rate of birth, making women give birth to more children. And it's insane, because there is a show which is coming from America. The most popular seasons are Ukrainian, and also we have the Russian seasons. It is called 16 and Pregnant. And the latest seasons, the one that are filmed in Russia and about Russians, they are propaganda of young girls, 16, sometimes even less, to give birth to children. How insane is that? At the same time, sexual relationships, they are considered as something that must be done to give birth to more children. But it is a taboo. And when it is a taboo, it leads to serious complications such as diseases or early pregnancies. And for example, the word sexual education, or not the word, the phrase sexual education at school is basically a curse in Russia. They give example, they show on the TV how children, teenagers are educated in Europe, and people are horrified, and they say that they're happy because there is no sexual education in Russian schools. I so wish my nieces and nephews, who are either already at school or will be at school very soon, I wish they had sexual education. I really dream of that, but maybe not in the next 10 years. The one who controls the past controls the future. And we had already mentioned that these people, the party consists of the gods, the god, the big brother. They control the nature. It's also the quote from here. And they control the past. They are capable of wiping off everything, and they are capable of changing the events and forcing people to believe that a certain event had never happened. And in Russia, unfortunately, it's also similar. Yeah, because I'm talking about similar points here, okay? Sorry, my brain is boiling already because it's very hot here, but although there will be a slight difference, the Russian authorities, they also kind of control the past, but in their case, they're clinging to the past, and they choose the convenient things. And inconvenient things, they prefer to forget or not to mention them. And if someone mentions them, this person is punished, because we have various reasons why you can be arrested. For example, harming the sacred memory of the Second World War or the veterans, and usually those are inconvenient truths. And I have an article, actually. It was, I think it dates somewhat some time from the 9th of May of last year, and it is called The Inconvenient Truths About the Second World War, although the bravery or the heroism of the Soviet soldiers must never be forgotten, but there are also some aspects that the Russian authorities prefer to eliminate, because in the modern Russian history there is not much that we have achieved, and all the heritage of the USSR we tend to lose, we tend to give away, we tend to waste, so to say. For example, our space campaign. And the past, the glorious past, is something that helps to unite people, and that helps to convince people that the people at power right now, they are the inheritance of the USSR, that they are the inheritance of this glorious past, if you know what I mean. Then, the last but not least, I want people to look around more and to pay attention to what is going on. Because if you look into this book, and people, they are also brainwashed with the TV screens, like in Russia, and propaganda is pouring onto on their heads and into their heads. And as Winston says, it's very easy to believe into everything if you don't see all the destruction that is happening around you, that if you don't see the actual colors. And in this book, for example, there were pipes that were always damaged, that always needed replacement. The same in Russia. We had so many accidents when people stayed without heating during the coldest times, because the pipes also needed replacement, because they were lying in the ground since the USSR and nobody cared for them. Or the houses were falling apart, or they were all wearing like the same clothing, and also there were things that were not on sale, some basic things, basic necessities that the government wasn't able to provide people with. And if you don't notice that, also, for example, that people are like just in Nazi Germany, all people are strong and beautiful and always young, but at the same time the main character, he's coughing all the time, and he stops coughing only when he meets Julia, and when he for some instant feels happy together with Julia. And the same thing, how many times did they say the same in this video? But in Russia also we hear constantly how great the wins are, how great our army is doing, and people who die in the war, they are concealed. They are not showed. Like if you don't go to a cemetery, you wouldn't know if nobody from your family was affected. But if you go to a cemetery, you would see so many newest graves with the war victims, or the war criminals, you can call them wherever you want. And those are the signs that they are not obvious, but the reality check. Very important. Even if you are living in the most democratic and the happiest country in the whole world. Well, the video is already quite long, I would say. And I think it doesn't matter, because I felt like filming this video, and I think today it's a very important topic, because we all see what is going on. in various countries, and I'm not even talking about Russia. And I'm very grateful to be in the place and in the position in which I am not threatened, I am not in danger to speak out openly, and this is thanks to Germany, the country that hopefully will stay liberated and yeah, empty. Yeah. And I think I will be ending this video. If there is something that you want to share in the comments, I will be very happy. If you'll give me a like, and it will help my channel out to develop, I will be very grateful. But yeah, you don't have to do anything of that. I hope you enjoyed this video, though I can imagine that it was disturbing. And next videos are going to be a bit more peaceful. I am going to film one writing routine, and also in April I'm moving out from my friends into my proper home, and I will be filming a video about that, of course. And for my Instagram, I think I will also film like the first view of the flat. And also I might film a video where I'm telling stories about all the things that you could see on the background of my old videos, because these things are historical and I am really attached to these things, and they all have some story behind, and I might share it also in Instagram, or I haven't decided yet. And yeah, thank you for watching. Stay free. And I probably want to finish with one quote. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. Stay in peace. I hope your family is in peace, and I love you very much. I am sending you love, love, and peace, peace from my cold, chilly northern Germany, but sunny. And tschüss.